right, it is a double episode week, so this episode is featuring Ann Tibbets, who is a literary agent at DeForio, and she is a screenwriter turned author turned lit agent, so she has tons of amazing information to share with us, and she gives great feedback, which I think if you're querying or getting ready to query will be super helpful to you. Make sure to follow her on Twitter. She shares her reasons why she passes on queries and, different tidbits of information about the industry, and it's pretty great. She's wonderful. So let's go ahead and hear from Ann Tibbets. Ann, could you tell us about what drew you to publishing and being a literary agent, and, maybe a little bit including your author journey, because I know you've had, about a few books published in that process.
Well, I'd always loved books, but I actually went to college to be an actor. I thought I was an actor. I wasn't a very good one. So for a year in, I realized that it was really writing that I loved. So I switched to playwriting, and then I studied playwriting, and this was at Cal State Fullerton until the Cal State Fullerton playwriting program shut down. So then even then I couldn't study that. So I studied that for a little while. It was theater. I was just in theater. And then after college, I got into television production. And worked in post-production as a writer's assistant on a TV show, and then sold some scripts, freelance scripts, for some very bad 1990s action hours and a couple of kids shows that were actually pretty cool. And then switched at that point to writing books, because it was really my first love. And it took 4 books that I had written before I managed to get an agent. And then she sold that book. And the sequels, and I wrote a sequel, and then there were several books that went out on sub in the interim that didn't sell, which is often the case, because I'm very envious of the writers that are able to have every single thing that they've ever written sell. That's amazing.
Right.
And then I wrote the Invasion series, the Extinction Biome series for Rebellion. Under a different name, because the IP actually belongs to them. So I wrote that book for them, 2 of them, and then decided to get into agents in, because in between each of those books that didn't sell, I was interning for agencies as a reader, which is something I did way back in my television production days. So I would read books for them and then give coverage, and then a brief little synopsis, like what I thought of it or whatever, and then the agent would then use it. Or not use it, depending on how they felt about it. And both of the agents that I interned for at the time said I was in the wrong line of work, that I should really be. And at the time I thought, oh no, I'm going to be a writer, and writing is my only one and only passion. And then, but it was like a seed that got planted, and I just couldn't stop thinking about it. So eventually I just said, you know what, life is short. And this is really what I'm good at, then this is what I should be doing. So I gave it a try, and I have to admit they both were right. I hate when that happens, but it happens. When someone knows you better than you know yourself, and I'm so happy I made the switch. I've never actually been happier with what I'm doing. So I finally found it. It's amazing. Midlife crisis, and it worked out for the best.
It was a good midlife crisis.
Exactly.
Well, I think that's great. So you talked, about how you've always been a reader and loved books. Has that just been the way it has always been for your life, or do you remember, like a specific time when your love for books began?
I would have to say Mrs. Wilsey in the 4th grade, because she allowed, how they always required reading, like in 3rd grade you did, like, the Island of the Blue Dolphins, and you did like Anne Frank Diary, and it was always like you had to do the same set, and the whole class had to read the same book. But the 4th grade, Mrs. Wilsey was like, read whatever book you want, I don't care. So I thought, I get to pick whatever I want. So I found in the library Dicey Song by Cynthia Voigt, which it turned out was a sequel actually to The Homecoming, but I didn't know that at the time. And it was the first book that I had read that I was so emotionally invested in that I was crying by the time it was over, because I was so sad it was over. And that kind of, I guess you could say, reader's high, for expression, been chasing that ever since the 4th grade. That same feeling you get when you are transported to another world, be it on Earth or off Earth or just in another character's world. That feeling, that escapism, is really the ultimate high for me. So that's when it all started. So thanks, Mrs. Wilsey.
Yes.
But thanks for that.
I love that you remember that. That's that first reader's high and that love that it began in that moment. And what a cool teacher to just let you, pick a book, whatever you want to read. That's wonderful because, reading the same book as everyone else is kind of boring.
Yeah, well, some of the required reading was actually really good, but I think it's because everybody was reading at the same time and the assignments were repetitive. I like the freedom of that. So it worked out to my benefit, obviously.
Yes, it got you through to go through your whole journey and end up where you're at now, which we're happy you're a literary agent and sharing your information with us and your knowledge. So let's get into the query questions, because I know a lot of people love to just hear your feedback and your opinions on it. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, but you share on your Twitter reasons why you've passed on queries, and you had a really funny tweet today about rhetorical questions in your queries, and that cracked me up. So I just love that you're just very, open and, like you mentioned, trying to help writers understand that it's not personal, that you're not, trying to be mean or hurt their feelings. But my first question for you is, do you think queries need to stick to the specified formula? Now, this isn't like your agency's submission guidelines, but the formula of, I'm not trying to pull any tricks in your query, and including, the basics of like the who, what, and the stakes, and of course, all the information that it needs to have, like the genre and the word count and comps and all of that.
Yeah, I know every agent's got different specifications, so I can kind of go blanket, always follow submission guidelines.
Yeah.
There are so many queries to get through that it helps agents wade through the massive amounts of queries that we get, because it's really overwhelming. So thank you in advance to everyone who follows submission guidelines. So that goes without saying. I think if you're going to have anything in particular in your query, I definitely feel that you should have a 2 to 3 paragraph pitch that describes the beginning, middle, and end, and the end, and with spoilers of your book, so that, if it's and this is a query I get a lot, is, hidden magic these days. I've got a character who wakes up and then all of a sudden has magic powers and then gets sent to a magic school or sent to a magic, or they're in hiding or something. That's a query that's going around a lot, a pitch that's going around a lot. So I'll just use an example. If there's something unique about yours, if it's something completely different than every single one that you've seen out there, I want to know it in the pitch. So don't hide it and save it for later that I'll read when I read the book. I might not get that far.
Yeah.
So put spoilers in your 2 to 3 paragraph pitch. That would be my suggestion. Then a bio, just so we know that you're a responsible, an adult out there in the world. And any previously published information, self-published counts. Like if you've got 3 self-published series out, I want to know about that. And I think those are pretty much the main relevant ones: the pitch, the bio, and publishing history. Everything else is just frosting at that point.
Yeah.
Those are the main things.
I think, I feel like it's a little bit different that you want to know the spoilers, because I feel like a lot of people think that the query just needs to be like the beginning, the inciting incident, and just like leave you hanging a little bit so you want to read more, But I do like your point that if it's fits into like maybe the query that you see a lot with the hidden magic and all of that, to include why it's really different and special is a good idea, because before you read the pages, or if there's no pages included, to get your attention even more by including that is a smart idea.
Yeah, as a writer, I had actually written a blog post about how to write your 2 to 3 paragraph pitch, and I say, don't give any spoilers away, because you want to hook the agent's attention, not give it away for free. And now that I'm an agent, I'm like, that's wrong. That's wrong. Don't do that. Give away the milk. Give the cow free that you give away because we need that.
Yeah, you look at so many queries every day, always, that to see something a little bit different would make it stand out, I imagine.
It would. That would make me go, oh, I want to read this one, and that instigates the request. So it works to your benefit.
Awesome. That's something I haven't heard before, so that's really interesting. Let's talk about what your number one query no might be.
I have so many that it was hard to pick my number one.
I know.
But my number one, I think, is negging. Which is where they say, like, I don't think you're like all the other agents. So I think they think they're probably complimenting me, right, that I'm, but they've just insulted every other agent out in the business who's been doing this for like way longer than I have, and successfully so. So insulting them doesn't compliment me because I'm looking to be them. So it doesn't help me that it's different. And I think maybe they think it's a compliment, but it's not. And then or the negging in that they insult other people's books in order to make theirs seem different. Like, they'll say, like, my book isn't anything like those horrible Harry Potter books, or I'm nothing like the Da Vinci Code. I'm like, those were bestsellers.
Right.
They made lots of money. They're actually really good. Have you read those books? There's benefits to all of them.
Yeah.
So by smashing other people's books doesn't make you look good. It just makes you look like sour grapes. So that would be my number one no-no, is don't be a negative Nancy. Try and be positive and just pump up your own stuff without stepping on anybody else.
I could imagine, too, if somebody was, like, negative about their own work just without even insulting anybody else. Like, I don't know if you'll like this, like something like that would be not preferable either.
No, it feels like emotional manipulation. Like,
yeah,
they want me to, sorry for them, like it's my job to somehow pump up their ego or something. And I'll do that if you're my client, but if you're not my client, then it's not my job to pump up your ego yet. I mean, I've just met you and you're already talking bad about yourself. So yeah, I think that would backfire as well. That's not a good philosophy.
No, not a good way to get your foot in the door, for sure.
Yeah.
So what things in a query or first pages, besides, being a negative Nancy, will make you stop reading?
Overt sexism, racism, and excessive gore would probably be my three biggest. I mean, I love gore and horror, because you really can't have horror without gore these days.
Right.
But I don't want it on the first page. It's a bit jarring. And I don't even know the characters yet. So, you're watching a woman get torn to shreds, and I don't care. I don't even know who she is. So it seems a bit more like you're trying to shock the reader. And it's hard to be shocked if you don't know where you are and nothing's been established yet. So I would say excessive gore in the beginning pages, or like a sexual assault in the first page, because that's too jarring.
Yeah.
And then just racism. Like I read one that has the N-word all the way down the front page, and I'm God,
no.
Okay, I don't know this world yet. This is really, I don't know the author yet. It was really rough to get through that writing sample. So I'd say those were the ones that make me stop reading almost right away. Those three. Good
to know. Yeah, place yourself and the reader in the world a little bit more before you throw a bunch of crazy stuff at us.
Yeah, exactly. Give me a moment. Just a little bit of time.
Yes.
But
well, on the flip side, what's your favorite thing to see in a query or first pages that just like gets you super excited?
I think it was an original idea like I've never seen before, something new. And I know some agents would disagree with this, that I'm personally looking for something that's innovative, that's slightly different. Like a thriller that you wouldn't normally see on the bookshelf. I'm kind of looking for that. Whereas there are some agents that are looking for the typical thriller that you would already see on the shelf. So it depends. But I would have to say the writing samples, the pages, are the most important thing for me. Like, your query could be completely awful, but if I read the pages and the pages are excellent, I'm going to request. So I don't completely anchor everything on the query itself. The pages are what matter most.
Right. Because,
so
yeah, I mean,
sorry, go ahead.
The novel has to be good. The query can't just be good, right?
Right. If the query is excellent and I read the pages and I'm like, this needs a bit of work, then I'm not going to request. But if the query is only okay and the pages are phenomenal, I'm going to request.
Yeah.
So pages matter more than queries. So I think if to answer that question, I would say sample an amazing 10-page sample. That's what would absolutely catch my eye first.
I love it. I think that there's a lot of, attention and time put on queries, which totally you want to be sending a query that's put together and thoughtful and really, includes everything you need. But if you have a great query and then you haven't spent enough time with your story itself, or gone through the right revisions, that's only going to hurt you in the end.
Yeah, it's a different skill set. Like writing marketing material is a different skill set than writing a novel.
Yeah.
So, and I understand that not every novelist is going to be able to write marketing material. So, I would be okay with finding a client who, isn't very great at marketing, but that's what the agent's for. They're the ones that are going to be marketing and selling and helping the writer to a certain degree to market and sell their own work. So if I'm going to balance the two, I'd take the writing over the sales pitch any day. Always.
Yeah, I think it is, you're totally right. It's a very different type of writing. It's something that, I have sat over a query and pulled my hair out because it's 300 words or 250 words, whatever it's supposed to be, and you have to condense down your 80,000 words into that is very different of a skill set.
Yeah, not to mention the synopsis. Write a synopsis of your own work.
Ugh, I can't.
Extremely difficult too, but a lot of editors want one.
Yep.
Along with the novel, so that's another skill that a novelist would need to acquire.
Yes.
Write a synopsis.
Take some practice and some going over it over and over again. Well, do you have any tips or, golden rules for authors who are querying right now? And then, you mentioned how if an author had, self-published before, that you'd want to know about that. Do you have any different tips for self-published authors, or you just ask them to, include that they've been self-published before when they're querying you for something new?
Yeah, we'll definitely include that you've been self-published before and, give me a title so that I can go look it up. I'm a little paranoid when it comes to links. If somebody sends me a link to their book, I'm not going to click it. I'm going to go search it on my own and go find it because, as I said, paranoid about clicking mysterious links. But I'm going to go search it out and look it up online if you're self-published. But the main issue for me with self-publishing is I want a new manuscript. I don't want that. There are agencies and agents out there who will take previously self-published or currently self-published titles, and then they will try and shop those to a traditional publisher. For me, I'm looking for a brand new manuscript. So my number one golden rule for me would be something new.
Yeah.
So, if you got a whole series that's already self-published, fantastic. I don't want book 4 of that series. I want book 1 of a brand new one. So that would be my number one golden rule. And I have to be very specific because I'll reject and say, you know what, I don't self-publish. I don't accept self-published work. And then they email back and say, well, this is book 5. It's not self-published yet. And no, it doesn't work that way. It's already part of a series. I need a new one. Go send me a new one. So that's
how would you take book 5 and try and sell it to an editor? That would be a challenge for sure.
You can't. You would have to start with book 1. They would want the beginning of the series, and it's already self-published. And given that I am still new in the agenting game, it's difficult enough to sell a brand new book. Now try and sell one that's got a self-publishing history as well. Then that's another difficulty that I'm not prepared to take on at this point in my career. So.
Yeah. And what about for authors who don't have that self-published background? What would your just number one tip be as they start the querying process?
I think my number one query for brand new is to not query your first draft of your first novel. Because I get a surprising amount of writers who say, I've just finished my first draft of my first novel and I need some help. And could you help me, it's published? And I'm thinking, this is the first draft. It's a little premature. Go join a writer's group.
Yeah.
Go get beta readers and some crit partners and go workshop that thing. And then send it to me. But don't send me your first draft because I know there are some agents out there who will take on a project and work with a writer in rewriting and editing, but I tend to do that with clients I've already signed, not with ones right off the bat.
And I think I think that's a good reminder, and I think something that our writing community and just Twitter and everybody's so open and connected now that it's a good reminder just to reach out, because first draft of first novel is usually rough, unless like you're like some people write their first novel and it's like the most amazing thing, but like I look back to my first one and I'm like, oh my gosh, wouldn't let anybody read that.
I wish there were some words that I could unself-publish, quite honestly.
Yeah.
And there have been some that I have unself-published because I've gone back and read them years later and I was like, oh, it wasn't ready at all.
No.
It's more work. So, so that would be, and you're right, the Twitter is great these days for connecting with other writing community, even more so now when I first started out writing books like back in 2007 or so. So it's a great way in order to connect with readers groups and crit partners and beta readers and just to get yourself more used to taking notes also. Yeah.
Getting feedback and learning how it's not personal. They're not trying to hurt you, but they're, internalizing that and then being able to change your story based on it.
Yeah, and learning to grow and no draft, even a final draft, is not written in stone.
Yeah.
So anything can be changed.
Definitely. So what else do you look for in an author? You've read their query, their pages, they're full, you love it, you get on that call with them, and what are you looking for somebody, to work with long term?
I think professionalism is probably the number one. Yeah, the number one thing I'm looking for is professionalism. I view an agent and novelist relationship as a professional partnership. Like we're in this together, so it's professional. I saw a panel at the SBCWI Summer Conference a few years back, and Ginger Clark, who's a YA, among other things, agent at Curtis Brown, was on an agenting panel, and she leaned into the microphone really deep because somebody asked her, what are you looking for in a client? And she goes, I am not your therapist. And everyone started laughing, and at the time I thought, wow, that's cold. But, retrospect, years later, I'm like, wow, I totally get that now. Like, your agent is not your muse. Your agent is not your motivator. Your agent is not in any way responsible for your creativity or your word count. Like, that's all the writer's job. You have to be able to write your stuff and meet deadlines, and writing, I'm sorry, is an art, but it's also a business.
Yeah.
So, no, mind you, I'm always one to give a pep talk when needed, and I fully understand the emotional pitfalls of writing and submitting and all of that fun stuff. But at the same time, I'm really looking for someone who has got that self-motivation, who is professional, who, if I ask, I need a synopsis by the end of the week, they're going to be like, great. And by the end of the week, I've got one that's in my box. That's what I'm looking for, particularly in a client, because that's going to work to benefit and show that they can do this when they're working with an editor in a publishing house. They can do it there as well.
Yeah. And I think it's a transition that, some writers, and, I think before you know a lot about the industry, really seeing how it turns into, more of a business relationship and just a business for yourself and your brand and your name can be a hard transition. So I think it's, good to remind writers as they enter that growing process, like, okay, you're not just looking for somebody to you obviously want your agent to love your book and gush over it and love it for you, but, you know, they're not going to be like your best friend. They're going to be there to like champion your book and help you get it to be the best where you can be, but it is a professional business relationship.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And I know writing is so personal that it is sometimes very difficult to separate the personal from the professional, but that's the kind of business relationship I'm looking for is someone who is emotionally mature enough in order to tell the difference.
I think that is something that is, you know, good for people to know who are querying you, and just good for, you know, authors who are querying to kind of wrap their heads around as they go through the process. And so what are you looking for right now? What's on your manuscript wish list? I know you mentioned that you get a lot of queries for things you don't even represent. So let's clear it up. What do you represent and what are you looking for right now?
On my manuscript wish list is young adult and adult thrillers, mysteries, horror, historical, science fiction and fantasy, and romance. What I don't represent, and this seems to be a theme this week, is screenplays. I'm getting a lot of no screenplays. That's a different kind of agent.
That is a different kind of agent.
Yeah, but I just recently added romance was the last one, so I'm a little short on romance actually at the moment. So if I had a wish list, like my number one wish right now would be romance, and then unique thrillers. That's always a given.
Fresh and new thriller.
And on voices with authenticity and character depth that goes beyond like the same old thing, but with just a new cool setting and a new cool time period, something that's a little bit deeper than that.
Awesome. Well, good. Well, no screenplays, everybody. No screenplays.
No.
So, and my last question is actually my favorite, because we're all, you know, lovers of books and love to read, and I'm sure we all have lots of things on our reading list that we still need to read, but I love to know what your favorite book is right now. This isn't your favorite book of all time by any means, just a book you've read recently that really stuck with you.
I absolutely adored the Calculating the Stars duology by Mary Robinette Kowal. That was amazing. I got to meet her at the Nebulas, so that was even cooler.
That's the best.
It's so cool when you oh look, she's a real person.
Yeah.
I just finished The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starling, and that is spooky as hell. It was fantastic.
Awesome.
So I loved that one. I'm a big Suzanne Kearsley fan, and her new book, Bellwether, came out earlier this year. I love that one. And then The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay. That was fantastic.
That one's been on my list for a while. I'll move it up there because I've been wanting to read that one.
It's not your typical thriller. He's very cerebral, so it's all about it's all in your head. So it's not much happens in the way of plot, but a lot is happening. If that makes sense, I don't want to give spoilers, but it was well done because it wasn't what I was expecting, which is even better.
That is the best.
And I liked Poppy War. And I actually I haven't read a YA, and even though Poppy War felt like a YA, it wasn't sold as a YA, so I really need to read something in YA that's fresh and new. But one of my clients writes YA for another agent, and her name's Dawn Muse, and she wrote Lizzie, which was a retelling, modernization of the Lizzie Borden story, and I loved that one. That one was amazing. And great ending on that one.
Ooh, I like a retelling of something like that. I'll have to check that one out too.
Yeah, good.
Cool. Well, awesome. I love hearing what other people have loved reading recently, just because, you know, I just need to read more books, even though I have a list a mile long of the books I do need to read.
The list goes on and on. It's never ending. I've just accepted that.
Yes.
Because at the moment also you need to read submissions, and then you need a palate cleanser after you read a submission to remind, so you can keep yourself hankered in edited books versus unedited books because it's easy to get lost in submissions. So I highly recommend it. Lots of good stuff coming out lately, so there's plenty to choose from, that's for sure.
Definitely. And there's lots of good ones coming out. And thank you so much for chatting with me and telling us all about you and what you're looking for and, you know, your query no-nos and your favorite things to see in a query.
It's been my pleasure, and thank you for having me. I hope it's been helpful.
Another wonderful literary agent interview down. And I'm so grateful to have her on the podcast. I hope you guys all enjoyed it and got to know her a little bit better. And if you have stuff she's looking for, go ahead and send it her way. And as always, please share about the podcast and reach out to me if you have any questions or just want to say hi.